In this tutorial, I'll show you how to knit and crochet bags to felt. For both knit and crochet, I will start at the bottom of the bag, work some increases, work the body of the bag, and work some decreases. I will show how to create a strap or handles and an optional closure flap and buttonhole. For knitting only, I'll show the bind off and how to seam the bottom of the bag. Complete these steps and the bag will be ready to felt. Information about supplies, how to get written patterns, how to contact me, and more information is in the description box below. You can see my supplies here. For knitting, I have some circular knitting needles, size 13 US, and that's 9 millimeters, circular knitting needles, and 2 stitch markers for knitting. For crochet, I have my crochet hook, which is a US size 13 9 millimeter crochet hook, and I have 2 stitch markers for crochet. For both knit and crochet, I'm going to use Patton's Classic Wool Worsted. The crochet will be in a different color. I will use this green for the knit. I have a tapestry needle and some snips. And of course, you might want to get a pen or a pencil and paper if you feel like you want to take some notes. In the description box below, you'll find timestamps you can use to skip to the knit or crochet sections of the video, to go forward to what you want to watch, or back to get me to repeat something. Let's get started knitting this bag to felt. My circular needles are 24 inches long, 24 inches long total, including the needle tips themselves. And that's the size I recommend. My size 9 millimeter US 13 knitting needles. Start, of course, by making a slip knot. I'm placing the working yarn. This is my working yarn. This is the tail of my yarn. Place my working yarn over my tail yarn. Get a loop through there. Now, everybody has a way of doing this. Some people are graceful about it. I'm not that graceful about it. But there, I have a slip knot on my knitting needle. And I use the long tail cast on. So I have already made a nice long tail for myself. This is about 3 yards of a tail, and the reason I left that much is I want about 6 inches to weave in the end. I want about a yard to seam the bottom of this bag when I'm finished. And I then need to also account for the stitches I'm going to cast on. I'm going to cast on 60 stitches. So I allow about 1 inch for each stitch. So I have, like I said, about 3 yards of a tail here. And I like to err on the side of caution. It's probably longer than that. I just estimated it. Let me show you how to get started with the long tail cast on. And this is the cast on I recommend for this bag. Again, this is my tail. I'm going to keep that laying there so you know this is my tail yarn and this is my working yarn. I have the slip stitch on my needle And I'm going to put my thumb and my forefinger between those pieces of yarn, pick it up in my hand, give it a little tension. Tilt this up and pick up that piece of yarn right there, tilt again and pick up that piece. Pull it through and drop off. Of course, I'll do this a few more times and I'll try to be quite slow about it. Pick up that piece of yarn, pick up that piece of yarn, pull it over the tip of your needle and let it drop off. And let me show you how I pick up my yarn again. The tail yarn, the working yarn, put my 2 fingers in there, open that yarn, turn over my hand and grip it with my palm. With my other 3 fingers, grip it in my palm with my other 3 fingers. Tip it like this to pick that up, tip it back the other way to pick that one up. Pull the tip of the needle through and let it drop off. Your stitches should be nice and even on your needle. And I'm going to start from the beginning one more time. And the reason I do that is I often start my cast on several times because it's important for this beginning to be neat and even. Now, that said, felting forgives a lot of mistakes, so if it's less than perfect, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it at all. So here's my slip knot, my working yarn over my tail yarn, my working yarn up through that loop, onto the needle, pull it tight. No more graceful than the first time, but still success of a slip knot. I just really think I can do better than that. There we go. Okay, and then my working yarn, my tail yarn, my 2 fingers, my thumb and my finger between those 2 yarns. Grab a hold of it with these 3 fingers. Tilt so you see the underside, the palm side of your hand with those fingers gripping. Take the tip of that knitting needle. We're doing a long tail cast on. Take the tip of that knitting needle, scoop that piece of yarn up, scoop that piece of yarn up, and then let that loop on your thumb drop off your thumb and pull it a little bit taut, just evenly onto the knitting needle. And not tight, but just taut and even against the knitting needle. Here we go again. I hope this is helpful to you, and I hope you will let me know if you have any questions about this long tail cast on. See, the stitches are sitting evenly on my knitting needle. All the little bumps under there look tidy. And I'm going to cast on a total of 60 stitches. And once I've done that, I'll come back and show you what we're going to do next. I've cast on my 60 stitches. I've counted them twice, and I have made sure that none of them are twisted, that they are all facing the same way, all nice and neat on my circular cord and knitting needles. I'm going to zoom in for just a minute so you can see how all the stitches are turned in the same direction. See how tidy they are, lined up all along the cord with all their bumps on this side and all their loops on this side. And I have 60 stitches cast on. I have my tail end tied up in a little ball over here, just because I like to keep it out of the way. And I'm going to join to begin knitting in the round. Of course, there's more than one way to do this, but for this project, I'm going to do the most simple join and just get started knitting. I am going to place a stitch marker. It's a little skein of yarn that says yarn. I'm going to place it on this needle to mark my first stitch, and then I'm just going to knit this first stitch to join. Now these 60 stitches are a little tight on this 24-inch circular knitting needle. Like I said, this is a total of 24 inches counting the needle tips. They're a little tight, but we're going to increase, so it will be just fine in just a couple of rounds. If you want to, you can cast on a shorter needle and switch it out, but I find this easy enough to work with. I knit continental. I can knit English and a couple of other ways too, but this is my chosen method. This is the way I learned, and this is the way I like to do it best. So I'm just going to make one knit stitch to join to be working in the round. And this first round, we're going to knit all the way around, all 60 stitches. Halfway around, after stitch 30, let's place another marker. This one says made with love. And you'll see as we go along why we want to place a marker halfway around. Let me do that, joining in the round for you again. We have our 60 cast on stitches. I have one needle in my right hand, the other needle in my left hand. Like I said, I do knit continental. I slip the right needle into that first stitch and just make a knit stitch, whether you knit continental or English or however you do it. Just knit that first stitch and it's joined. Now, if you have your needles switched up this way, it's not going to create a join. You're just going to start knitting back and forth. So if that happens, just undo and get back on track. Get back in the round. I see that my stitches are still all turned the right way. My stitches are not twisted. I'm going to knit that first stitch to begin working in the round, and I'm going to knit all the way around, 60 stitches. I will count my stitches as I go, or stop and count them. Since I'm talking, I might not be able to count them as I go. And after I've knitted 60 stitches, I will place a marker. And right now I'm just going to take a few knit stitches and let you see that we're just knitting into this cast on round, or this cast on, knitting into our cast on and working around. And I just slide those stitches as I work, slide them around, get them where I need them and I can reach them. Of course, this first round is always a little tricky, for me anyway. If you knit English or any other method, you won't have any problem following this tutorial. Of course, if you knit continental, you won't have any problem following this tutorial. If you want some tips about how to knit continental, how to knit English, how to pick, how to throw, different things, I'd be glad to recommend some videos that I've seen that I really have enjoyed, that I think have been very instructive. Or I will be glad to work with you and do some more videos to show you exactly how I make the stitches. I'm going to continue to work around, knitting all 60 stitches in this first round. I'll place a marker halfway around when I make it to the first marker, marking my first stitch. Then I'll start the second round. I'm going to try to get up very close and do a couple of slow motion stitches for you. I said I learned to knit continental. It took me a long time to get good at it. And then I taught myself some other methods, and I use them sometimes to rest my hands, but mostly I knit continental like this. And I'll be back to begin the next round with you. And we're going to do some increase stitches. We've finished round one. We're going to start round two. But see here at the end of round one, it looks a little loose and sloppy right there. That's really not a concern for a couple of reasons. For one, you can pull on this pretty hard, pull on your tail end, tighten that up. Give it a good tug. Also, if you didn't tug it up and it were left a little loose, this is going to be hidden by felting. It's one of the beauties of felting is it will hide a few mistakes like loose stitches, tight stitches, a skipped row, things like that you can get away with when you're felting. So here's the beginning of round two. I've slipped my marker, and on round two we're going to make some increases. And I'm going to show you how to do it a couple of different times in a couple of different ways. Knit the first stitch, then make an increase. You can make the increase however you choose, however you're comfortable with making an increase. Because it's going to be felted, the difference between a left-leaning increase and a right-leaning increase isn't really going to be very noticeable. So use whatever increase you're comfortable with. You can do knit one front, knit one back. There's an increase. You can do make one right, and that is you put your left needle in this little in that little piece of yarn between the two stitches. Pick that up with the tip of your needle, however you need to get it on there, and knit in the front of that. And yes, you're creating a twisted stitch, but you're making an increase. This is called a make one right. You are creating an increase, and it's not going to be noticeable. My stitches are trying to get away from me. Let's not let them. Phew, get them back on there. So that was another increase where I made one right. I made one in this bar between the two stitches. And again, you can do that kind of increase. You can do a knit front and back, or if you know another kind of increase, you go ahead and do it. I'm going to use the make one right because I want my knitting to grow to the right in this direction. So I'm going to make one right where I bring the tip of my needle through that bar to the front and knit into the front. And I know that this is a make one right because it goes right in front. And then we're going to knit to one stitch before the next marker. And then we're going to increase again. Knit to one stitch before the marker, and make another increase, and make any kind of increase that you choose to make. I'm going to make a make one left here because I'm increasing and I want on this side of the bag, I want to increase in that direction. So I'm going to make one left. And so to do that, I take the tip of my needle and put it through that bar to the back, and I knit in the back of that stitch and make one left. Let me show you that again. Take the tip of my needle, put it through that bar to the back, and knit in the back of that stitch. That one is make one left, and I know it's left because it's left back. Remember, the make one right was right front. The make one left is left back. Knit that final stitch before the marker that marks the center of our work. Knit one more, and then another increase. So you'll always have two stitches before your increase, and you'll always have this marker that marks halfway. One that marks the beginning and one that marks halfway. So you have an equal number of stitches on each side of these markers at the end of each round. So like I said, here we are halfway through. the second round, and here I'm going to make one right. And I will tell you in the pattern whether to make one right or make one left, but the fact is you can use any increase you choose. To make one right, I put my needle to the front and knit in the front. So I've made one right in the front. And then I knit across to one stitch before the marker, and that next marker will mark the beginning of the round or the end. I see it as the beginning, but whatever makes sense to you. We have one more increase to even things out and make the number of stitches on each side of the marker, each side of the markers to be equal. And as you saw when we started, it was kind of a tight fit to get all 60 stitches on this 24-inch circular needle. But even with these first increases, we're increasing 4 stitches on round 2. Even with those few increases, it's already a little bit easier to manage the stitches on the needles. And here we're just about to come to the end of round 2, and then we can begin round 3. At the end of round 2, we have one more increase, and I am going to make one left. This is the beginning of our work. It looks a little wonky, but I'm going to find a bar to work in. There, let me tighten it up a little bit. Like I said, give that a good tug. And then I just need to find a spot to put my increase. There's a bar I can get my needle into, I think. Let's see. I have, and I haven't split the yarn. And I need to, yes, I did it the right way. I got my needle from the front to the back, and I'm going to knit in the back of that stitch and make one left. And yes, that was kind of tight and fussy and fiddly, but it's going to be just fine. It's fine now that I've made the stitch. That final stitch on round 2, slip the marker, make that first stitch on round 3. I always like to make the first stitch on the next round so my marker stays there and doesn't fall off. Next, we'll do round 3. And round 3 is knit all the way around. Just knit. Round 4 will be another increase round. So I'll do that one with you. But go ahead and knit around, all the way around. You now have 64 stitches. We started with 60 stitches. You now have 64 stitches. So knit 64 stitches around, and I'll see you at the beginning of round 4, and we'll talk about those increases again. We've knitted 3 rounds, and we're ready to begin round 4. We have 64 stitches. We began by casting on 60 stitches. We knit 1 round. Round 2 was an increase round where we increased 4 stitches. So then we had 64 stitches. Round 3, we knit around. So we still have 64 stitches. The next round, round 4, we're going to increase again. And this is what your work should look like. We started at the bottom of the bag. This is where the bag will be seamed at the bottom. Don't worry about that right now. I just thought that might help you see what we're doing, that we're starting at the bottom of the bag. This will be seamed before we're all done, and we're working from the bottom up. And round 4 is another increase round. You can use whatever kind of increase you choose. I use make one right and make one left increase, and I'm going to show you that again. And I'm going to take this marker, this yellow marker, and mark a few stitches just to pretend like when I get to this yellow marker, that's the end of the round. And I can show you both the make one right and the make one left without stitching all the way across my work. And I hope that will help. I'll try to demonstrate it a couple of times for you. And this again is for people who would like to learn this. Make one right and make one left. If you want to increase some other way, you just go right ahead and do that. That'll work just fine. We have completed round 3. We're beginning round 4. I've already knit this first stitch on round 4, and now I'm going to make that increase by creating a make one right. Bring my needle to the front, through that bar, from the back to the front, and knit a stitch in the front, and make one right in front. That's how I remember that you make the stitch in the front on the right leaning. The make one right is because you do the work in the front. Let me show you again a make one right. My needle from the back to the front, work in that bar that I've brought up, make a stitch in the front, and there you've made one right. You've created an increase. We now have 2 stitches where we had 1. So then work across to the end of that, to the next marker, not to the end, to the next marker. Till you have 1 stitch left before the next marker. So you never increase 2 stitches in a row. You're always going to have 2 stitches between your increases or decreases. Here we're going to make one left. And to do that, we put the needle through the bar to the back and make a stitch in the back because it's left back. It's just left back. And there we have another stitch. We've created an extra stitch. We've increased. And I'll show you that make one left again. And of course you can rewind this and make me do this repeatedly, which I often do with YouTube videos. Make the creator do it again and again until I get it. So here we're going to make one left. Our needle under that bar to the back and make a stitch, a knit stitch in the back of that bar. Complete to the marker, slip the marker, you're going to knit 1, and then if it's called for, you do a make one right. So it's make one right, make one left, make one right, make one left, and then you will have increased 4 stitches around. So do that on this round 4. You will then have 68 stitches. Here's a little bit more information about the increases. why we're doing them, and when and where to place them. This is a bag that I knitted and felted, and we are starting right here, and we are working around. This is where I've seamed the bottom of this bag. So in our work, the seam is still open and we're working around this way. And these increases we're doing are creating these curves right here. So the bag has a little bit nicer shape and it's not a blocky square corner right there. You have a nice curved corner. So that's why we're doing the increases. And as I explain this, this will help the decreases when we come to them. This will help the decreases make sense as well, because we're going to create just a little bit of a curve here at the top of the bag as well. Here's where we are so far. So this opening will be the seamed bottom of the bag. This will be the front or the back of the bag. This over here will be the front or the back of the bag. This edge where we are increasing at the stitch markers, that's going to create this little bit of a corner. That's why we're doing these increases. Pardon the interruption. I think my phone got hot and my camera cut off. And I had just explained that we're making these curves right here with the increases. Let me show you where to place the increases. Going to place them before and after the markers. So when you begin the round, you have a marker, you've created a stitch, and then you're going to create the increase in this bar right here and work around till you come to the other marker, one stitch before the marker, make an increase. Knit that stitch, slip the marker, knit that stitch, create an increase. So you're always going to have 2 knit stitches between your increases. 2 knit stitches and a marker between your increases. So we started at the beginning of the round, we knit 1, we created an increase, we knitted 2 within 1 stitch of the next marker, make an increase, knit, slip the marker, knit, create an increase, knit back over here to the end of the round to within 1 stitch of the marker, increase, knit, and you have completed the round and you have increased 4 stitches on that round. And that's how every increase round is worked, the same way. You're increasing 4 rounds and you're placing them in the same place on each increase round. And the increase rounds are rounds 2, 4, and 6. On round 5, you will knit around. That's all. Just knit around. On round 6, you will do another increase round. So you will increase again 4 stitches on round 6. And then you will have 72 stitches and you can begin to knit in the round. You're finished increasing. Way to go! You made it. You made it through round 6. That's the beginning of the bag, and there's some easy going coming up. We've completed 6 rounds, beginning to be able to see the stitches. You have 72 stitches around. If you don't have 72 stitches around, you just make whatever adjustment you need to get to 72 stitches, or so that you have an equal number of stitches between your markers. This does not have to be perfect or precise for it to turn out just fine. Make sure you haven't dropped any stitches as you do your adjustment. If you have and you need help picking it up, I can try to help you. If you need help with anything else as we go along here, I'm available. Please leave comments or email me, and we'll continue to work on this together. What we're going to do next is knit around for 59 rounds. So rounds 7 through 65 are knitting around. Because you're knitting in the round, there's no purling. There will be a little bit of purling later. But for right now, knit in the round until you have a total of 65 rounds. Does not have to be precise. If you're off a few rounds, it's not going to make any difference. It will look rather long and narrow, and that's how it should look because the knitting will shrink quite a bit in height. It's going to get shorter. It will shrink this way more than it will shrink this way. So when you're finished knitting it, you will have a bag that appears to be long and narrow, and that's how it should look. So keep knitting. Knit till you have about 65 rounds, and I'll be back to talk to you